Hey there drone fans, Rick here again from Drone Valley. In today's video, I'd like to show you two hidden features that are engineered into the Gen 2 controllers from DJI that weren't discussed in any of their manuals. Now if you're flying a drone that uses a controller like this, you may already be aware of the features, but if you're a newer flyer or somebody that's missed some of our earlier clips where I've discussed these, I thought I'd cover them again today so you can take full advantage of those features. The other reason I want to talk about it is because the engineering teams that design a controller like this really spend a lot of time thinking through the details of how they're going to build it and how you're going to use it as a consumer, and they'll engineer in feature sets that a lot of times never make it into the manual, and then it must be frustrating for them to know they've done something really cool that very few people know about. Now, I stumbled across them very early in the release of this controller when the Mavic Pro came out because I like to spend a lot of time really looking at the technology, and when I uncover something that's interesting, I want to start thinking about why would you build that into the product? Why did the engineering team think that was important to change the molding or adapt something differently on the controller? And then that leads to a conclusion. So the two I'm going to talk about today are kind of cool things that are built into it. And I'm doing it again so that it'll help you protect the remote and really expand its use case with different display devices. Now, for point of reference, I've got three controllers in front of me, the three generations of controllers. So when I say Gen 2, I mean Generation 2. This is Gen 1, and that's the original controller that DJI built for their Phantom series of products. It's a phenomenal controller. It's bigger, it's a little bulkier, but I really like that controller, and that's still being used today in the Phantom 4 Pro V2. When they came out with the Mavic Pro, which was their first folding drone, they came out with a smaller controller, which also folds up. So this has been used on the Mavic series. It's available for the Spark series, the new Mini SC, the Mavic Mini, all use this style of controller, and the two things I'm going to talk about apply to this controller. And this is the Gen 3 controller, and this came out when the Air 2 came out, the Air 2S, the new Mavic 3, all use this Gen 3 controller, and probably all the drones going forward will use this controller for some time. Now, there are hidden features in both of these, but I'm going to focus on the Gen 2 controller today because this is the one that a lot of people are asking questions about because the new Mini SC is very popular, the Mavic Mini is really popular, and both of those use this controller. So the first one I want to talk about has to do with the antennas. And this controller was designed to fold up really small because the original Mavic Pro is designed to be small and it folded up really nice. So when you fold this up, you'll fold the two arms in underneath, which eliminates those two arms, which makes it a lot smaller, but then you still have to deal with the antennas. And they designed this to flip one antenna in and down, and the other antenna in and on top of that first antenna. Now you would think, let me just throw it in my bag and I'm good to go. And of course you can pull the joysticks off as well. But the problem is if you throw it in your bag like this, these two antennae are really at risk of being pulled out like that if it's in a bag with other things, and then these are incredibly vulnerable and could easily snap if they're pulled too tight against the backing of this unit. So what DJI thought about, and again, there's a brilliant engineer buried somewhere in the labs of DJI that came up with this, the antennas themselves, if you look really close at the end of it, you'll find there's a little post sticking up right here on this antenna, and right here there's a little matching notch. And if you lay this one down, and you lay this one down on top of it, if you push down gently, listen close, you'll hear a click. You hear that click when it clicked in there, and that locks the antennas together. So now they're one unit and they're not going to pull apart. When you want to use them, you just basically push them this direction and they'll open up, then you can stand them up. Now again, it's a small thing, but the engineering team spent time to build molds. They could have very easily built the same mold for both antennas and saved a bit of production cost when they were designing it. But instead, somebody in the factory said, wait a minute, they're going to bust these antennas if we just leave them flop around like that. So we know we can fold them down, and that's great. But if I can lock them together and snap them together so that they're not going to pull apart, that's going to be a home run and nobody's going to break their antennas. So that's one feature that's built in to pretty much every version of this product. Now again, these all have roughly the same form factor, but they're a little bit different depending on which drone you're flying. The Mavic Pro looks a little bit different than the new Mini SE, but fundamentally they're all the same. So when you close up your antennas, make sure before you throw it back in your bag that you click that down and make sure they lock together, and that's going to save you breaking those antennas. Interestingly, I'm noticing other manufacturers that have controllers that look similar to this are now adapting that same type of feature. So if you look at some of the newer drones that are out there that are small that have a controller like this, I'm not going to point them out by name, but they're using that same locking feature. Now the second feature was something that I stumbled across with the Mavic Pro really early on because I was using an iPad mini and I really wanted to use the iPad mini with the controller, and the problem is this was designed really to handle phones. So it can handle phones, really large phones in the bottom, and essentially you'll slide your phone up between these two arms, you'll clamp the arms on the side of the phone, and there's rubber inside here to hold on to that, and then there's a cable that comes down from the side that plugs into your phone, and that's typically how most people will fly it with a larger phone. But I wanted to use an iPad mini, which is my preferred size of tablet, So I thought to myself, well, it's interesting that if you look closely in these arms, there's slots along the edge of the arm. And I thought to myself, why would you build slots in there? Okay, the cable comes through this one, I get that, but why would you put a slot on the other side? And then I thought, well, maybe it's because they're saving money on molds, but these are fundamentally different the way they're built. So I looked closer at it and thought, well, what would I ever use those slots for? And just fooling around with it, we figured out pretty quickly that you could slide a tablet up. And the reason those slots are there is because the corners of the tablet can slide through the handle and come out that little slot up top. So it gives you the perfect way to hold a tablet in the handles. Not only that, but it almost looks like it was designed for the iPad mini, because when it's in the handles, it's perfectly balanced in your hands. It's like the perfect solution for this type of controller to use this size tablet in there. So I'm sure some engineers at DJI thought about that and said, you know what, we can certainly build this to hold a phone. That's not that big a deal. These clamp a phone really well, but what if somebody wants to use a smaller tablet like the iPad mini? Well, we can't just jam it in there because those little corners are going to hit the inside of these arms. But if we cut a slot in there, that allows those two corners to pop up through those slots and hold it perfectly. And again, without a case, it slides right up in there, no issues whatsoever, and the rubber holds it in place. It's not going to move around on you. If you're using a case with it, especially if you have an OtterBox case, you may not be able to jam it up inside there. But if you're clever and you're brave, you can actually take a Dremel and gently, or an X-Acto knife, and gently pull some of that rubber out of there to widen that gap, so make it wider to actually fit a thicker tablet in there. And I've done that when I've used some of the harder cases that I use with the iPad minis. I've broadened this up or opened this up, widened it a little bit using an X-Acto knife to be able to fit something bigger in there. So I think those two hidden features, again, they don't seem like a lot. Maybe you've already seen these and it's not that big a deal, but I champion the engineering team that put this together, because they're sitting in the factory going, I had a brilliant idea last night. Let's snap those antennas together. They could have put a clamp on there and made it really awkward, but somebody said, well, wait a minute, they marry up like this. Why don't I put a tab on this one and a notch on the other where they snap together? And everybody got excited and they built it into the product. Somewhere along the line when the manuals were being put together, they missed that. So it never translated out to the manual where they're telling you as a consumer, that's a cool feature. And then this one was even more mysterious to me, because if I were DJI, I'd want to brag about the fact that the controller can handle pretty much any phone on the market today, including a smaller tablet like an iPad mini. That would be a big feature, a big benefit to me. But again, that missed the manual somehow. So hopefully you find these two little tips helpful. I like this controller an awful lot. I really like the new one too, but this one is so small. It's so easy to bundle up, throw in your bag, and not have to worry about it, that these two features for me really expand the use case. So hopefully you found that helpful. I've got more clips coming this week on drones and a lot of other high-tech gear. If you haven't subscribed to the Drone Valley team yet, Drone Valley channel, hit that icon down there and join the family, because we've got a lot of really cool stuff we're going to be reviewing over the next couple of weeks on drones and a ton of other high-tech gear. And if you subscribe to the channel, you'll get a little ding when we put up a new clip. Then you can come back and you can see what we've put together for that day. So thanks an awful lot, and until next time, happy flying.